Hey everyone, this is Will from Beijing, China, and welcome to this brand new and exciting episode of The Missing Piece. As we are speaking right now, it's hard to believe that in the year of 2022, right now at this moment, we are witnessing the first international conflict between the two countries, Russia and the neighboring country, Ukraine. It's hard to believe that, again, as I mentioned before, it's actually taking place throughout the media and throughout the entire international community. Russia just officially invaded this country, Ukraine. Despite the limitations and despite the political hindrance from other partners, the leader Vladimir Putin did not take any advice. And as a matter of fact, the things we're witnessing today in Ukraine are quite unimaginably painful for us to watch. So that's why, in order to get the first-hand information, and I always say it's better to hear from the horse's mouth. And that's why I want to invite a special guest in order to protect the guest's identity, and we're going to call this person Mike. So that's why I want to say, Mike, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mike, as you are right now in Ukraine, can you tell us, or can you simply describe what you are seeing right now at this moment? As I mentioned before, because throughout the media, the day or the moment that Russia troops invaded this country, it was terrifying and scary, not only for the people in Ukraine, but also for the people outside across the continent are watching how this whole event is being unwrapped. Can you tell us what is going on, or what have you been seeing right now?
Well, I woke up at 10 a.m. Local time, and I heard some sound, and I thought that was some kind of aircraft, but I was told that it wasn't an aircraft, it was a missile. So in the morning in Ukraine, Russian missiles started to target, military infrastructure of Ukraine. So airports, military bases, anything that has to do with military. Some headquarters of you name it. Literally anything that has to do with military has been targeted by the Russian missiles.
And Mike, again, as you mentioned that the minute you woke up and you realized this country was under attack, or this country was being invaded by Russia, how surprised were you, and what about the reaction from the people around you? So if I can take a one step further, previously for days that we have been told as an outsider that this country, Ukraine, was or can be or could be invaded by Russia. But again, everything was up in the air. But right at this moment, just a few hours ago, it actually took place. Were you surprised? And how about the people around you?
And of course, you cannot be prepared for stuff like this. You'll always be surprised. But as you know, Ukraine experienced annexation of Crimea back in 2014. So Ukraine is at war. Well, we call it proxy war, hybrid war. So for 8 years, it was so-called proxy war. It was not direct. It was you name it. So Russia annexed Crimea and then supported separatists in the east of Ukraine. And I would say that it was inevitable. So this invasion was inevitable. This is my personal opinion based on facts. As you remember, back in December, Vladimir Putin rolled out official demands toward the United States, NATO. They had to stop the enlargement of NATO in the Eastern Europe. But I feel that, the United States and President Biden, they didn't take it seriously. like I feel I worried a lot back then that, like if a president of such a big country as Russia tells you something, you don't have to take it, take it easy. You must take it seriously. Like if Vladimir Putin threatens directly, his words must be taken seriously. And since like neither President Biden nor leadership of Ukraine seem to take his words seriously, I think that just like, Vladimir Putin had it enough because, as I said, the conflict has been going on for 8 years in Donbass, in the east of Ukraine. They're like, the official data is that Ukraine has already lost around 15,000 people, and most of them are civilians. Not today, but for the previous 8 years. And I don't know, like I dare to compare the situation that is going on between Ukraine and Russia. I would compare it with how relations are between mainland China and Taiwan. Because I have friends in China and they are quite well informed about what is going on in Ukraine. So, if you watch Western media, there's a lot of propaganda and misinformation that, Ukraine has nothing to do with Russia. It's like completely two different nations, but it's wrong. It's not like that. Ukraine and Russia, in fact, have common history for centuries. And yeah, you can find some Ukrainians that you're gonna say, yeah, Russia is our enemy, yeah. But you also can find Ukrainians that gonna tell you, no, Russia is not our enemy. So there's unfortunately a lot of propaganda, misinformation, and the chance for compromise, for consensus, for agreement has been lost. It was lost back in 2014. So, just recently, we've got some, we've got mainstream media and we've got some, let's say, opposition media, right? So, there's some, government agenda on what is going on in Ukraine, and there's some opposition agenda, more peaceful. So, the government agenda is okay, Russia is our enemy, we need to fight Russia. But there is also opposition media that says, no, Russia is not our enemy, or at least we don't want to wage war with Russia because Russia is much bigger and much stronger than Ukraine. Starting a war against Russia means a suicide for Ukraine. And as I said, you can find many Ukrainians, you're gonna get many different opinions on what is going on. So I'm also, I invite you to communicate to as many Ukrainians as you can. You can collect different opinions. But my personal opinion is that the war between Ukraine and Russia is artificial.
What does that mean? Can you tell us a little bit more? What does that mean to be artificial? And also, Mike, during that moment that you were sharing with me, again, I am so sorry to say that it's happening in your country, and you indeed sound very deflated about what's happening right now. But again, I still wanted to help us to understand, what does that mean when you say the war between Russia and Ukraine is so artificial? What does that mean, by the way?
So, as you remember, there was a so-called revolution in 2014 in Ukraine. I didn't support it. So, as I said, if you want to understand the root cause of the conflict, you need to go back in the past. Everything started from the so-called revolution in 2014. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna, to give you a better picture, I'm gonna give some examples from China as well. So, I would compare a revolution that took place in Ukraine to events that happened in Hong Kong, both 2013, 2014, 2017. So I would compare Ukraine to Hong Kong. No, I really do. I really want to compare these two events, but again, too much propaganda, too much misinformation. When people of the same nation start to kill each other, that's terrible. And the difference between Hong Kong events and Ukraine is that, let's say, I would put it this way, the common sense won in Hong Kong. The common sense prevailed, but in Ukraine, no. The so-called revolution won, and the common sense lost. So, Ukraine lives in a reality of lost common sense, unfortunately.
I think the simple question that everyone was trying to answer, or even though, despite the complication of the bilateral relations between those two countries, by taking action against Ukraine, what was Vladimir Putin's main purpose? Is it really, as some experts predicted, that Vladimir Putin was trying to make a point to the United States, given the point that, for decades we've been saying, or even since the recent election took place in the States, foreign policy side, U.S. right now, it's a hot mess. So for Vladimir Putin, it's just taking advantage of this opportunity, or taking advantage of the vulnerability of the U.S. and really demonstrating something that maybe the world, or especially the Western side, has never seen before about Russia or about Putin. Does that make sense? So in other words, what was the drive for Putin to take this immediate action right now? And he seems so confident and so bold and so daring to make that decision.
Well, as you know, 30 years ago, Ukraine and Russia were a part of one country. This country was named the Soviet Union. So it collapsed in 1991. By the way, the year I was born. So I was born in 1991. So, if you ask people that who are either over 30 as me, who are 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, they remember the time when Russia and Ukraine were one country. And there was a time, for example, when Ukraine possessed nuclear weapons. But after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine voluntarily gave up on all nuclear weapons and transferred it back to Russia. So it was a big deal. And from that time, Ukraine inherited lots of, military infrastructure. Ukraine is capable of producing aircraft, missiles, all this stuff. And I would say it was much thanks to the united efforts Russia and Ukraine had as one country. So for Vladimir Putin, he's, I don't remember his age, but he's over 60. If I'm not mistaken, he's 67, if I'm not mistaken. So still, most of his life, he remembers that Ukraine is a part of Russia. And he has all the rights to think that Ukraine is a part of Russia, is a legit part of Russia, in his mind, because like all people are subjective, and like we're all, every person has different opinion on what is going on. But when you ask millions of people, it's gonna just, all you have to do is to find out who thinks what, and like in a large scale. So, as I said, there was a lot of propaganda and misinformation, like throughout 30 years of Ukrainian independence. And as I said, like, you're gonna ask, like, let's say you're gonna ask 10 Ukrainians about what they think what is going on, and you're gonna get 10 different answers. Someone's gonna call it like, okay, like Russia's our enemy. Somebody is gonna say, no, Russia is not our enemy, so there is no uniform public opinion on what is going on in Ukraine. So too much chaos, too much, too much chaos, yeah.
So let me ask you this way again, going back to the word propaganda. Again,
Yeah.
Mike, you are living in Ukraine, and again, as an outsider, we just saw videos and after videos throughout the media that there's bombing at the airport, and people rush into the grocery store, and they were really, I don't want to use the word looting, but they were trying to empty out the shelf, and they were afraid, and I mean the Ukrainians were afraid that food was going to run out. But another source that told me that, for Ukrainians to going into the battle to fight against the Russian troops, it's all about the word freedom. So in other words, if Ukrainians refuse to fight against the Russians, they might as well just hand Vladimir Putin a piece of cake. But in order to avoid doing that, to continue to fight for the freedom, that's what the Ukrainian troops or the government is doing. So from your perspective, do you think that makes sense? Is it really about the sense of freedom? Or it's something more than that?
We already discussed this issue last year, and in my personal opinion, there's indeed, it has a lot to do with human psychology, like what it's, there is a lot about education and family upbringing. So, like, since I have been very interested in studying psychology, so like, some people, they see oppression everywhere. So like, and that is why they seek freedom. Even if the people live in a free country, they still want more freedom. So something similar you could see in 2020 in the United States with the Black Lives Matter movement, if you remember. In 2020, the entire United States was shaken by the riots. Okay, like you could put it this way, because I remember from the news that some police stations were captured by the rioters in the United States, and like, some African Americans, they believed that they were slaves and they were oppressed by America, so they wanted some revenge. I don't know, like, slavery is over, like, for more than 100 years, but some African Americans truly believe that they are slaves or like former slaves, and they seek liberation, they seek freedom. So, like, I find such explanation irrational. So the same way as African Americans seek freedom in today's United States, the same way some Ukrainians, they seek freedom from Russia while living in a free country. Like, this is my opinion, because I thought that I lived in a free country. Like, we've got, freedom of speech, all the stuff. But, like, to some point, Ukraine became similar to the United States in a bad way, I would say. I would put it this way. Because, when the police stations are captured by rioters, this is not something like you would like to live next to, if you know what I mean. So if you live in a neighborhood and like you see rioters capturing police station, something's wrong in this situation.
So you're saying because it's the internal corruption or the internal vulnerability that provide a channel or that provide a mechanism for Russian to take advantage of the country. Is that right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's put it this way. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, Ukraine always had, like, let's say, 20%, 30% of the population that has always been pro-Russian. Let's say 1/3 of Ukrainians always supported Russia. Always. Not before 2014, not after it. Always. No.
Well,
and lots of citizens of Ukraine are actually ethnic Russians.
Well, Mike, just follow your thoughts. If that significant proportion of the population in Ukraine are actually supporting Russia, what is the purpose for this war? So in other words, why can't people, just leave the country? Or again, if they are so getting tired of or fed up with this current situation, the political instability, why can't they just leave? So again, I know we're circling back to the question is, so why wait for Russia to invade? Because this is such an international scene, or this is such an international spotlight in a negative way, don't you think?
I think it has a lot to do with the economy. So, like, in my opinion, Russia, like, let's put it in business terms, like, Russia tried to handle it in the least costly way. So, for most people, for most ordinary people, moving elsewhere is too expensive, simply. They've got their property, they've got their jobs. It's too costly, too expensive to move elsewhere, to move to Russia. It's too expensive. That's it. And as for the motivation for Russians to wait for Russia to invade, well, the Russian propaganda says that, like, Ukrainians speak Ukrainian language and Russians speak Russian language. And since, like, as I've said, 1/3 of citizens of Ukraine are actually ethnic Russians, there's no surprise that they would like to use their mother tongue, like, when living in Ukraine. But the current government of Ukraine does not allow Russians to use their mother tongue in their, like, at the official level. Of course, they can use their mother tongue in everyday lives somewhere, like, in their private, but they're not allowed to do this officially, in mainstream media. So Russian native speakers are not allowed to speak Russian on mainstream media, for example, or read newspapers, or their options for buying books in Russians are limited. So of course they can buy books in Russian, but there's a certain trend and policy on limiting the access of Russian native speakers to using their Russian language. And Ukraine is a Christian nation, and there are lots of Christian congregations in the world, but Ukraine is a so-called Orthodox Christian church. And 3 years ago, in 2019, former president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, he created a brand new church. A brand new church that, well, the whole point of creating a brand new Orthodox church was to separate the Ukrainian Christians from any connections with Russia. Because Ukraine and Russia used to have the common Christian church, Orthodox Christian church. That was, it was like one body, like in the past. And so the decision to create a brand new Christian church was, like, in my opinion, was down to separate and to pit even Ukrainian Orthodox believers, Christians, from Russian Orthodox believers, Christians.
So in other words, for Ukrainians, it's all about the word identities. So again, we want to be different from Russians, even though that we might not satisfy with our current country or with our current political system, but we do have our own identities. Mike, I have two more questions before letting you go. I know this is a sensitive and critical time for you to join the show. Now, my next question is, by taking actions against or invading Ukraine, how do you think such strategic move could elevate or could change the image of Vladimir Putin right now?
Well, I would use the word demonized or demonization. The image of Vladimir Putin has been already demonized. So I don't see the reason why he would be scared, because, as I said, he has been already demonized. Like, if you understand what I say about what I mean by the word demonization. So when or let's say he's painted black all the time. So, like, for him, I heard that already. If you look at the stock exchange in Moscow, the trading is going down. So, like, foreign investors, they start to sell out their Russian assets. But, like, if President Putin has already initiated this operation in Ukraine, well, he doesn't care about all this stuff, about his image. Like, I would say even more that, like, I heard that in some European countries, such as France, for example, there's even some, a sympathizer of Vladimir Putin. So, like, I mean, I talk about some proportions of European population. Yeah, they sympathize Vladimir Putin. So, like, as I said, that's it. So.
Okay. My last question is, again, only within a few hours that we saw this invasion, and we saw people were, the Ukrainian government urged the citizens to stay at home and then to stay away from the main streets and etc. What can we expect next? So in other words, how long do you think this can go on in terms of this invasion from Russia to Ukraine? And are you prepared? When I say you, I mean individually or maybe as a collective identities. Are you ready for the next stage, or are you ready for something even worse than what you have already experienced today?
So, in my opinion, the purpose of Russia is to create the new government in Ukraine. Because, like, the current government of Ukraine is anti-Russian at its core. The purpose of Russia is to create a new government in Ukraine. As for the population, I don't know. Some of them, smart people had to be prepared for this psychologically, at least. As for the other aspects, like having enough food and water, like, no, unfortunately, no. People are not prepared for this. as a matter of, like, as for the time, also very difficult to say anything right now. Like, for how long it's gonna going on. No, unfortunately, I can say, like, it can be a matter of days, it can be a matter of weeks, something like this. Yeah, but I'm sure that yeah, it's, let's say, at the very at the very most, it's gonna last, let's say, 1 month. It's the very most. But, like, I think everything's gonna happen very fast. I think so.